Action, wasn't it? What was what was it? The Berlin.
Times, it was the Times of London headline, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for
Yeah.
banks.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was there in 2008 for the first one. I let go of my license because I saw the second. And what happens when interest rates are zero? Well, it means that money is uh, right.
Right.
And these were conversations we were all able to have over the phone. But God forbid you had. It's like people are like, hey, why don't you speak at a conference? I'm like, they don't want to hear this shit. Are you nuts?
Right.
Right. So I've just avoided the whole conference space.
Hmm.
Like I virtually just ignored it because why? Like, you know what I mean? You'd have a
Sure.
better conversation just sneaking out for coffee. And so, long story short, I came across your work, and it was at least towards honesty, right? Because I think it's hard to be completely honest because everyone has an investment portfolio. Let's say that,
Mhm.
right? But
Sure.
towards honesty, I'll take at this point.
Right. Yes. Accepting generalized conflict of interest culturally. Yes.
Right? And so, just kind of one of those things. So, the reason why I want to kick off season, and I'm just going to make sure my, okay, good. So, the reason I wanted to kick off season three was kind of seeing that you were willing to be honest about Bitcoin and what its intentions were versus where it is now, regardless of what the unit price fetishism may lead a savvy investor to believe, right? Because
Hmm.
if the price goes high enough, people can conjecture about why that price is there. And
Right.
all of them can be false and none of it matters, but they can still be on stage and talk about it and be like, yes, this is the reason that this price is here.
Yep.
Which is funny because talking about value analysis and manipulated markets is beyond me. Didn't Heather just print another gajillion like yesterday? At the
Oh, all the time.
moment that
Yeah.
El Salvador, so it's almost like El Salvador, right, bought the whales supply
Hmm.
and then they bought it back again at their own discount.
Yes. Correct. So buy the rumor, sell the news. The news was going to be the, sovereign nation issues BTC as legal tender, and there you go. So to some of the poorest people on the planet, uh, here's your new money. 20% drop the first day in value, and they're being told about the value of hard money, the value of fixed supply, sound monetary system. And imagine you're living on $3 a week, and the $3 that you have was in BTC and is worth $2.20 by the end of the day, even though
Well,
you didn't spend any.
I think the funniest thing is that you were better off buying Tether.
Hmm.
At least Tether would have stayed the same price.
Right.
Okay, so to
Well, and
go
this
back,
and this is the thing. I mean, it's actually tragic. I mean, this is a tragic
I
occurrence
decided to
because these.
laugh instead of cry. That's what stand up taught me.
No, for sure. But and I've been talking about this. I've been saying on Twitter, and people just keep telling me, "Oh, Kurt, you're so salty." It just comes off as desperate and salty. And I'm like, no, this is a human rights issue. Like this is terrible. Like these poor people are being forced to use a system that does not work for their like outside of the capital. They don't even have internet almost anywhere. I mean, we're talking about one of the poorest nations in the world adopting an internet-based currency that barely works. And then the only way that they can conceivably use it is by utilizing the government issued lightning wallet called Chivo,
Hold
which
on, they
is,
implemented Lightning?
yes, over a wallet that they issue. And then they even posted on Twitter, we had to shut the wallets off because we had an issue. So we are talking like they're pitching this as sovereign money for a sovereign people. Meanwhile, the wallet provider is like, we just shut the country off. We're doing some maintenance. So it's like
We're
these
better off with
people,
Visa.
you are indeed better off with Visa, which I would argue is actually the point.
Hang on,
In
man.
my opinion, the ruse here is that BTC and the whole user experience is so bad that it's sort of a double switcheroo, long tail marketing ploy by the credit card companies to make people say, you know what? I'm just going to stick to the plastic in my pocket because it works and the dollar works and everything else. I really genuinely believe that there's at least a portion of it that is a long tail
Well,
marketing ploy for exactly that, the big payment processors.
I teach music, and when I teach music, people are like, why don't they teach it like this? And I'm like, in my head, I'm like thinking built-in obsolescence and all of the tricks to keep the long tail revenue going. I think Elon Musk is saying, 100% of the dealers' business is from maintenance. And we don't need an oil change over here, right? They're having that fight in Connecticut. And so when I started really digging, it's funny because the initial reason I asked you to do the podcast was preempted by the fact you were moving, right? But then in between that time, I started coding in Money Button. I created with HTML on CodePen, right? I copied and pasted from the docs. I'm a headhunter. I'm not even a software developer, right? Granted, I'm brown, so maybe that allows me to do things or whatever, right? you never discount that. Maybe it's genetics.
Not touching that, but sure.
It's okay. I can say it. I can say it, right? But it's like, so this shit has been around for 10 years. And I've been around this space for a while, right? I'm going to use the Zilliqa shirt on, right? Which we'll talk about the big blocks. How is it so stupid easy to do with Money Button? Because I'm pretty sure there is like thousands of developers in the world, right? And so
allegedly,
and so that could do this, right? From end to end. And so I bring it back to the music because they asked me like, why don't people teach music like this? I'm like, yeah, because it costs more when you teach it worse, perhaps.
right? Yep. Yeah, you want to keep long-term students,
right? So, and I guess if you keep them doing calculus problems, you can, have them pay you $100,000 to do homework as a degree.
Seeing how that works.
I went to U of T. That's why I started going part-time. Actually, I started as an actuarial recruiter. And then I moved over to IT and ITIL recruiting and service management. Sure. So that's how I got into IT. But when I use Money Button, I'm like, if they can do this, how come nobody else is doing it? Right? And it took me a while to get my coding skills to the level where I could read through the documents. This is the JavaScript. This is the HTML. Oh, this is where I put the JavaScript. This is where I put it. But with enough time, recruiting these software developers and whatnot, I want to learn code myself. I was like, does anyone else see this shit? Because this is working. I can use HTML and invoke a JavaScript file, swipe right, and it works. And I'm pretty sure El Salvador doesn't have that today.
No, absolutely not.
Now, the question is, why wouldn't that functionality be created with any of the myriad of blockchains out there?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. I think not the least of which, you don't actually want a tool that works, because if it works, there's not jobs for developers anymore. Right. And all of these projects are run by software developers who fundamentally are looking for ways to have a job for the next few years. Right. While pumping valuations, like pay me in shitcoin X while I pump shitcoin X and develop on shitcoin X. And then over the next few years, I'm earning, whatever, a little bit, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more than the typical dev salary that they could be earning elsewhere, but also the value of the tokens are going up at the same time. So it becomes a really juicy opportunity for a software guy to earn a ton of money in a short amount of time doing something that would confuse normal people. But that's the thing. That's why there's 10,000 cryptocurrency projects. Like there's no other reason for that other than, hey, here's a big opportunity for me to confuse money out of people. And I think that's
confusing money out of people. I think that should be the name of the degree. You know, when you do finance,
yes,
how to confuse money out of people. Do you want to be on the
yeah,
accounting side, or do you want to be on the
right.
product
Well, and that's
development side?
so BSV in contrast,
Mm-hmm.
really, I mean, BSV was never even planned to exist, for one. I think a lot of people don't understand that this was not a grand plan, like, hey, we're going to create BSV to do all these things. Like, no, we were just the people in a few different communities who were saying, why the fuck don't the tools work on this network? And so you get the couple of people who are like, I really don't want to just develop a bunch of stuff that doesn't work. Wouldn't it be cool if wallets did this and this and that and were really slick and easy to use and allowed people to conduct business with each other? And then that group of people sort of coalesced into the Bitcoin Cash community over, from between 2017 and 2018. And then we became the bad guys because we were so focused on, well, here's all this other stuff you can clearly do with Bitcoin. And the Bitcoin cashers really were like, we really want to focus on the one thing, which is peer-to-peer digital cash, meaning you need to just buy your coffee at the coffee shop, buy your bananas at the grocery store, and pay with Bitcoin Cash. And we're like, well, yes, but you could also tokenize the receipt on the blockchain, and then that receipt could be used as an attestation for the value of what we're actually creating because it's an open data ledger. And then people can know that you bought the bananas and you rated the bananas. And then if you have all these data points, you can choose the best banana vendor on earth statistically. And the Bitcoin cashers are like, get out of here. We're doing peer-to-peer cash. That's it. Yeah. And so they kicked us out, basically.
I can understand the decision from a scoping perspective. But when I look at the power of BSV, the money button with the hash codes and the data operator, and I'm like, it doesn't cost you anything to add that data field, guys.
Exactly. Well, and people act like it's if it's a data ledger, it can't also be a cash ledger. And to which I ask, like, you think the computer is upset at the ones and zeros that are pushed through it? The computer doesn't care. It can be anything. I can pay you in coconuts. It doesn't make the coconuts less valuable as food. So it's like it's bonkers.
Because, typically in these discussions, you have a developer, and then you have an Austrian economist, and you have a founder product manager.
Yes.
Right? And each of them doesn't understand key parts of the market. Right? The only reason that I could talk to people about this is because I used to teach the fucking licensing course. So I had to learn all of this stuff down to calculating present values and, looking through prospecti and, again, reading Jack Bogle's thesis that led him to make $4.3 trillion by not changing his investments.
Yep.
Like he made $4 trillion by saying, no, I'm actually not smarter than the market. Right?
Right.
And so let's run it back, because to understand why I think there's a schism, right? We have to understand the Bitcoin Civil War, but to understand that and your role there, how'd you break into how'd you get your first break? Let's start there.
I mean, it goes all the way back to, I'm 35 years old. At 19, I'm from a crazy family. And at 19, I started to build my first business. I was in college doing a radio show, and I was a business major. And I loved both things. And I also started a t-shirt company because my brother was in a rock band. And I was like, hey, I'll produce your shirts. I'll like lightly manage your band. That turned into a full-blown printing company. Members of my family were all kind of involved and all of that. And like I said, my family's pretty dramatic, pretty crazy, and stuff didn't go real well in that venture. But in 2012, let me roll back a little bit. I started also doing IT because what we were doing is in the printing business, the old school printing, which is what my experience was doing like antique style printing. But I believed that with computers, you could make it efficient and allow really high-end, aesthetically pleasing antique printing to be done in a way that was more economical. So people would be willing to pay for premium stuff for a lot less than other people could, but it was also more expensive than your typical copy shop printing stuff. So I was trying to create a niche using computer, my knowledge about computers, which goes back forever. I was always just a tinkerer. And led to us doing a bunch of really interesting stuff, pre-press creation things. And then I had like a spin-off side business where I was doing a little bit of IT with some friends. So then IT led me into focusing specifically on security, which was, I came to realize security was a lot less about the tech than it was about procedure. So it's more about having people that understand when they're being social engineered. Because if you can stop all of those basic social engineering aspects of things, then the tech, it's not irrelevant, but the target gets way smaller for a technical hacker to try to hit.
The surface attack area created by an illiterate cybersecurity employee staff is larger than any technical holy grail cybersecurity. Yeah,
correct.
So I got into like an incident, like a security related incident that bridged you from IT to the cybersecurity side?
Usually it's like an emergency. That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, they happen anyways. Like we started, so in the IT consulting, we basically just decided to also accept security related stuff because we were doing a little bit of IT for people. And they're like, well, is this secure? And this and it's like, yeah, we think so. And so basically just turns into, study at home and like, okay, how do I actually need to like set up my subnet masking and all, like what is the outer perimeter and all of that? Like how do we set up a router to not use all the defaults? And there's a lot of really simple things like, a lot of hacking is, people don't change the password and usernames on their routers. And they're typically, it's just, admin is the default on
Shodan.io.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Shodan's great.
I was like, let me close this and burn that laptop.
Yes. Well, and that's exactly it. You can hop around the internet and listen to people's stuff, and you can set up very simple computers that run a very simple, like a Python script and just check like admin, and see if you get in. And it gets you into like something like 20% of the entire internet. You can just hop right into because they didn't change the default creds.
That's how they got in Equifax. Equifax's S3 bucket was admin for like 6 months.
Yep.
I don't security dude go nuts on me. He says like, forget about all this other stuff. He's like, this is like the biggest hack ever. We can't trust our social security numbers anymore. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, we can't trust them anymore. And like, didn't you see what the cybersecurity czar said? I'm like,
right.
This is just default. It's almost like the invisible attack surface of default settings.
Right. And it's probably the single biggest target, frankly, especially for like vaguely technical people. I mean, somebody that's, really just kind of understands the basics of computers can just sit and listen to the internet and try creds on stuff and work their way into security cameras and IoT devices all over. I mean, I've seen, anything. I mean, you can, and it can be like, an attack can be something as simple as like raising the temperature on thermostats at a company or that kind of thing.
SCADA system.
Right. You just start screwing with people. And that's the thing is that can be a vector in a larger attack too. You start to make it,
the Stuxnet was initially just playing with the valves, knowing that they could do it. And I think they did that for a few years, actually.
I don't remember the details, but yeah, I mean, but that's how you start. I mean, this is what you do is you start to pressure test thing or penetration test, as they say in the biz. But they so anyways, long story short, I was sort of in that space, but it was never my primary field. So it was something I was just also doing. And then in 2012, so I was also super into like money and politics and theory of money and economics and that kind of thing. So
What got you into politics and the theory of money? Because most people could give a shit about like, especially the theory of money. Most people could care less about, right?
sure. So I actually went to a very libertarian school from kindergarten through 12th.
Oh,
So
okay.
I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. I went to a school called Christian Liberty Academy,
Okay. You
and
weren't
they
joking, huh?
were yeah, no, they were, it was
That's insane.
everything. It was like we're gonna have a story. Like we're gonna have an entire class dedicated to the first and second articles of Confederation that preceded
Whoa.
the US Constitution.
Whoa, what a
And like,
concept. First principles.
right. So we're actually learning like, well, we didn't have a central bank in this country until, and like,
Ah.
here's the value of a gold standard, and here's what replaced it and why. And we're gonna study everyone from Mises and Hayek and all these guys, and we're gonna study Keynes. We're gonna like, but by the time I was
That's
out of
usually
high
fourth
school,
year economics.
well, right. So when I went to like business school and college, I'm just like, I didn't even need to go to class. Like, just give me all the tests, you know?
Exactly.
And they were really specific. Like the thing that was really great about that school too is they wanted you to um a phrase that they used all the time was called epistemological self-consciousness. And what that is to understand deeply what you believe and why you believe it over and above what you do not believe and why you do not believe it. But then it wasn't just that. They wanted you to be able to give an exposition of
Sound
that. So
doctrine.
we did tons, yes, we did tons of like oral reports, and we had to give like
Mm.
oral presentations, and everybody had to revolve through like debate team sort of stuff. And so the people that would graduate out of that school would show up and they'd have to do like an entrance interview at Yale. And the person there would be like, Jesus, like, what are you, a lawyer? You're 18, right? You know, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, I know my rights and here's why. And actually I read this and that. And
It,
it's this
it's the
ability
Socratic
to,
method.
it is 100% the
The
Socratic method.
dialectic. Yeah.
Yes. Which is what I bring up all the time on Twitter. You know, people start talking things, and I'm like, okay, so you're taking a Hegelian worldview, and this is why you have ended up in this camp. And they're just like, don't start calling
Right.
me. I'm not a communist. It's like,
Yeah.
no, like you
Uh,
don't know you're a communist, but you are actually.
it's that it's so interesting um that people expect the school to teach them this stuff. And I'm not sure
Mhm.
if school is, I mean, it sounds like if you went to your school, they were prepared to teach it. But I'm not sure if teachers are prepared,
No.
right? It's not out of
Well,
scope.
you wouldn't learn any of this stuff if you were like an education major and things like
No.
this is very special information that, you know, to me it was passe. I didn't realize because I didn't go to another school my whole life. I
Mm,
actually grew up in the hood. I was with a bunch of people that
okay.
didn't really have an education very
Yeah,
well,
yeah, yeah,
and then I was educated at this school, so that was like my
yeah.
exposure to
Yeah.
like, you know, I got this group of friends at home whose parents are in jail and they live with foster
Right. Yeah,
parents, you know,
yeah,
all these
yeah,
different
yeah.
things.
Same with
And
me.
then I go to this school where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
you know, my dad is general counsel at a Fortune 500
Yeah.
company,
You're like
and I'm
Stringer Bell,
here and
kind of.
right, you know, so I had a foot in both worlds
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
early.
Me too.
And so all that to say that, you know, when did I get into sound money politics? I actually don't remember a
It
time
was
when I
always
didn't.
it was always there. So it's funny. It must be
Mhm.
like speaking to kindergartners when you speak to them about economics. Because I mean, I think that's Daniel. Daniel is just like me, so is I'll say hi. Let me type a message to you while he joins in. That I won't. There you go. You can see that. So, um, I am fortunate because both my parents were teachers in
Mm,
Guyana, where they beat you up if you don't
okay.
know the answer.
Mm,
Um, and so I had two schools. I had the school at home, right? And then you had the school at school. And it was either I was in the wrong, because I was in a business grad, but I didn't want a business degree. I just figured they treat teachers like shit in this country. You know what I mean? And so I was like, well, what can I do? Well, I'm not smart enough to do sciences, so I guess that leaves business. Right? That was basically the extent of it.
It's
Um,
funny.
but this, these, they forced us to read Marx. They forced us to read everyone, Veblen, everyone. And it's the most
Hmm.
difficult thing to read because it's like reading Shakespeare, but economic theory and with a bit of lambda calculus. Literally, in Marx's case, it's lambda calculus he was using.
Right.
And it was, but to understand things from that ground perspective of this is how price fetishism works. You start with equating an apple and an orange, and then an apple
Mm,
to money. And then when you compare oranges, not to the apples, but to the money, all I have to do is increase
mm,
the value of the apple. And you might think you need to give me more oranges. And I was like, oh no, this is like literally the calculus he ran through. So when you look at the Bitcoin civil war, you're coming into blockchain and Bitcoin having essentially had a masterclass in how policy and political policy and monetary policy are cousins,
mhm.
having a dance together, right? So, what bridged that gap between cybersecurity and this whole world that combines your IT and your
Mhm.
childhood education and then your business savvy?
Sure. So 2012, a guy asked if he could pay me in Bitcoin to print him some posters. It was like a $50 job. So I
Mm-hmm.
said, sure, what the hell?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know anything about Bitcoin. I'd never heard of it until that
He
day.
introduced you to it.
He introduced me to Bitcoin.
Your
Yep.
customer introduced you to it. Interesting.
Yes. Random customer, a guy I knew very vaguely from, it was like anti-central bank activism. It was probably an anti-bailouts
Mm-hmm.
deal. It might have even been like Occupy Wall
Hmm.
Street or something, but
I
the
mean, it
guy
sounds like
wanted
a
me to
T-shirt for a new rock band, actually.
basically we were doing there were protest posters for an event that was at the Daily Center in Chicago,
Okay, right.
and it was some kind of anti-bailout
Yeah.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so he paid me like $50 or whatever in Bitcoin, and told me to check it out. It's going to change the world and whatever. So hey, cool, that's fine.
How did he pay it to you
I,
back then? How did you transact it?
he helped me set up a wallet. We set up a called Bitcoin Qs. I forget what the
Yeah,
full
yeah,
node
yeah.
wallet was called, but he told me you should run a full node. And here's the thing. So we downloaded it. Like it took me at the time, it took like almost 2 days, but he needed to come back in a day or two to pick up the stuff anyway. So he's like, here, just get this set up. Like you might even be able to find a block and that kind of thing. I was like, hey man, whatever. And so we set up the now it's bugging me. Is it Bitcoin Q? Is that what it was called? I can't
Yeah,
remember
right?
now. So yeah, so we did that, and then I had trouble with it, and so he came back and we set up I think it was a blockchain.info wallet, I think, at the time too, because for some reason it didn't work initially, but I was intrigued. I was like, okay, let's figure out what this is. And like I kind of vaguely understood peer networks, and I had used Napster and LimeWire and sort of understood
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. And then he was like, well, read the Bitcoin white paper. We're going to change the world. So I read the white paper and I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is super juicy. And then I went to, what I always do. I went to the internet, like, hey, what, does anybody know anything about Bitcoin? I had a couple friends that gave me some shitty answers. And then I found a video with Roger Ver talking
Mm-hmm.
about the power of Bitcoin. And he was very much in the same vein, like very libertarian, talking about
Yes.
sound money. And I was like, oh, this guy is processing the information about Bitcoin the same way that I would,
Mm-hmm.
and is very Socratic. He's very good at communicating also. So I was all in. Like he really convinced me over the course of like one or two YouTube
Yeah.
videos, frankly.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, shoot, I have some IT resources and stuff. Let's see if we can be an infrastructure partner here. And well, like let's see if we can mine. And so we were mining in a pool. We didn't run a pool, but we tried to I mean, we made a little bit of money, but it was all kind of whatever. It was all basically break even at the time, until we basically stopped earning enough money for our electricity. And it was because basically ASIC miners came out at the time, and we just were
Ah.
super not competitive anymore with our equipment, and we didn't understand why. So it was just like, maybe we're just doing something wrong. and we're wasting a bunch of electricity. We can't, like, we're not getting rewards for it, basically. So
So the mining
we
paradigm changed from a hardware perspective, and you guys woke up one day saying, what happened to all my
yeah,
mining, my internet
well,
mining?"
and we came to realize after the fact that it was basically China had pushed out the first ASICs, I think in late 2012 or something like that. So like right around when we were sort of getting bootstrapped, like it was good for the first few weeks, and then it's just like our
Oh man.
reward to power ratio just kept going down, 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 and we didn't know, but after the fact, we found out that basically China produced the first ASICs, or it might have even been the first FPGAs or something. But either way,
FPGAs. Yeah.
it was a big jump up
Hmm.
in efficiency that we couldn't compete with because we were all GPU at the time, and it was just we were getting fleeced.
What were you using back then? What was the card?
Um, I wasn't the one that managed it, so we had another dude. We had another dude that was managing the hardware part of it, and he set the rigs up. But it was like we spent like 10 grand on cards. Like it wasn't a huge investment, but we had some. So we were, or at least I put 10 grand in. I think my partner might have put in more. I don't remember now. It was going back a few years.
Your
But
profits on mining drop, but that doesn't dissuade you from interest in the white paper.
No, I was all in at that point.
What did you see in the white paper? Was it everything that you had explained to you in school operationalized?
Pretty much. I mean, for one, it was proof of work. So proof of work was the new thing to me. Like this was not a concept that I had ever conceptualized.
Let's nail that. I want to understand from your perspective what proof of work is and what it isn't. Because I think that really, when people are looking at proof of stake and how that changes, most people are just hoping the price of Ethereum goes up such that they don't have to care about the implications of proof of stake. But to me, this was the first interesting fundamental change that was being proposed to solve the scalability, speed, and security trilemma. And in my head, I'm like, I wonder what they're giving up. So what did you see in proof of work that really got you excited from an economic perspective?
So, I mean, it's not just economics, it's all kinds of philosophy involved. Right now, if you have a problem to solve, people think I need to hire an expert. Like if your house is leaning, I need to talk to a structural engineer, and I'm going to lean on his knowledge, his this hidden intelligentsia to solve this problem. And what stood out to me about proof of work is that it's essentially a guess and check system of every possible reality. This is how Doctor Strange figured out the right way to kill Thanos. Ultimately, he checked whatever it was, 14 million possible futures, right?
Was it brute force?
It is brute force. Okay. Proof of work is brute force. It is the perfect way to put it, which I had a little bit of experience in because like using Hashcat and things like that to noodle your way into cracking shitty passwords. That was something that I understood. Like, oh, okay, so we're looking for a targeted hash. And if we find it, if we're the first one to brute force the thing, we win. Like that's awesome. So it's this game, but it's a game using this aspect of cryptography that I had a decent understanding of. But it's not just that. It's the fact that like, why the hell is it that? Like, it's such a weird concept to be like, yes, brute forcing every block is the way we're going about it. It seems like a weird thing on the surface.
It seems like the opposite of everything you were taught on day one of computer science class, which is if you're going to output this times table, right? This one times 1, 1 times 2 to 1 times 10, you will fail, right? Yep. And get kicked out of class if you brute force the answer. You're supposed to use a for loop that iterates, right?
Right. There's an efficient way to solve this problem, and Bitcoin does it inefficiently. And to me, so what it does, and Daniel Yes, Daniel Krawitz explained this part really, really well. Like reading his stuff back in the day is what really made this click. And so I'm really honored to be a friend of his today, because he was a guy who, when I read his stuff back in the day, I was like, oh my God, like this guy. But what it is so you're creating this, like, it's a costly signal. You're saying it is worth it to me to do this absurd dance in order to find this block, because the block has value. And it's like the peacock's tail or the excessively large deer antlers. Like, these are things that look like they're a negative evolutionarily, but what they do is they attract power. It shows that, you know what, I have the might to bear these antlers and no one has killed me yet. And what does that indicate about me? It's like an old soldier, you know, it's like, do I want to get in a fight with a 60-year-old man who's got like scars on his face? It's like, no, this guy has survived way more than I can throw at him.
Yeah, he'll survive more than me. It's funny because I'm trying to think of my buddy Ahmed. He taught me, you ever come across cucumber and gherkin as a way to write specifications that will test code? So imagine you could have like a scenario and you can actually write it out as a spec, and the spec will test your code for that use case.
Oh, interesting.
Right.
Well, that's
so
cool.
I'm thinking about this. So as a blank, I want the hash solution such that I can get paid.
Yes. So if you mine the block, whoever brute forces the block gets at the time, I think it was 50 or 25 coins.
Okay.
If you mine the block. But here's the thing, like what it actually is, you know, people talk about, well, it's a spam filter and this and that, but it's like, yeah, but it's a spam filter for humanity. Like there are spammy humans everywhere. These are the people that have beach muscles, right? Guys that work out a lot but have never been in a fight, for example.
Yeah, and they'll get wrapped up in jujitsu in 2 seconds. Yeah,
exactly. So, you know, you get a guy who's like, he doesn't look super cut, but like he's a black belt in jujitsu and he's been doing Muay Thai for 12 years. You know, and it's like
his elbows are cut. Yeah,
right. Yeah. And like, you know, so that's the difference. Like a really good martial artist is proof of work, and beach muscles are in their own way, but not in that competition. And that's the point about Bitcoin, is it's about being fit, but it's about having prepared yourself for the fitness test of Bitcoin. And so proof of work was like, oh my God, this is a way to stop all the posers and the losers and the people that are really good at talking but not really good at doing. Like they have to either do the work themselves, or they have to team up with somebody who is capable, or a group of people that are capable of burning money and doing this ridiculous thing in order to mine these blocks. And
so I want to understand that, because let's bridge those two worlds. So proof of work requires computing power to brute force a hash solution for which you are compensated for. Why was that such an innovation to unlock actual work beyond the miners doing it?
Sure.
How does the other part of the market start?
So more than anything, the problem with every other monetary system on Earth, aside from gold is mined. So like gold doesn't come from nowhere. Somebody's digging it out of a hole, right? Or doing some other intensive process in order to get that gold. And so this was something that
theory of value, I think it's Ricardo, that said the value of a good is the amount of labor that has been embodied to bring it into being.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And people argue that that's not true. And I actually think Bitcoin is both and. Like it is that, but it's also more. And so I'm not a labor theory of value guy generally. So I
exactly.
People do frivolous work that doesn't have value, so it doesn't necessarily have a thing. But in Bitcoin specifically, because of the rest of the game theory of the system, it becomes much more valuable. But coming back to why it stood out to me is that, you know, fiat money is, you know, whatever the Fed chair says, put more money out, or you know, all kinds of other things of value. You get the people that are like middle management, like third-party admin, bureaucrat types. Like these are all roles where people's value is very, very subjective, and it's not creating as much value as it is being taken out by it. This is actually something that the communists criticize about capitalism, is that you start to get people that are put into this lazy hierarchy. And this is something I actually really agree with Marx on, is that the lazy, the bourgeoisie that sit and just do like, well, I'm a middle management person at an accounting firm that does business with, you know, the biggest iron ore company. And it's like, okay, but what so they're a bean counter, or there's somebody that's managing a bean counter And that's just like, it's such a waste of
Excel is the
resources.
bean counter.
Yes. But so what proof of work does is it eliminates the need for all of that inefficiency in these systems by saying, look, if the money is issued by whoever is the fittest to issue it every 10 minutes, then the king at the center of the network, whoever is issuing the most blocks, earned it. And the second he ceases to be capable of earning it, he will be replaced by the person that is more fit than him at the moment. And so it's this constant, perfect Darwinian system of, you know,
Right.
what would evolution do? Will evolution make the perfect predator? And
Right.
it creates the perfect predator by teaching that predator that the most valuable thing that it can do is cooperate with the rest of the savannah. So the king in a Bitcoin system, in a perfect proof of work system, is the most powerful. He is that glorious lion figure, but he has to make life as good as he can for every other animal on the savannah. It's his job to make sure that the whole system also cooperates with him, because if they don't accept his blocks, then his proof of work, his brute force, is orphaned. He's kicked out anyways. So you have to be great, but you have to be great at work and cooperation with the distribution of your work. It's brilliant.
So it's almost like you have a lion in perpetual fight, not to stay alive, if staying alive means being a miner with the latest settings. So I understand what connected it for me there was the fact that if the asset and configuration is solved, if you have I remember Blockchain Training Alliance, the guy with the beard, he called it triple entry accounting. And I was like, oh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh. How come nobody's saying triple entry accounting? Can't they just start there? Right? And I saw like, okay, if you have that happening, right? And the data is all there on the web, then I see everyone moving to, like, even Shopify, they have essentially schema-driven development, right? And all the data is being passed in through JSON, right? And as I learn more to how to code, I'm like, whoa, dude, right? Every time you learn like a new function, it's like, wait a minute, right? So, okay, so if we eliminate the need to bean count, does that disrupt how decisions are made in a system that requires bean counting?
I mean, it disrupts everything, because
Right?
the bean counter, what the bean counter is doing is a necessary function. Like, you don't want a
Absolutely.
business that doesn't account
No,
for
you
things.
have to have it.
But the question is like, when you start a company that only does bean counting, then that company also needs to have its own bean counting department,
Right.
and sales and marketing, and
Right.
like, so you get this bizarre inefficiency
It's almost
in
like
having
this,
everything.
like you have in a company, what they would do is they would have like a shared service.
Mhm.
So IT is a shared service, but it's almost
Yep.
like in everywhere you go, they all have the same departments
Right.
doing the exact same thing.
Yes. Imagine if you could replace that with a global proof of work network that was also doing proof of work on other data. So this is something that's occurred to me in just the last few years now. This is a BSV thing now. Is we brute force the hash, and that creates this game theory about making the best Bitcoin network. If you allow Bitcoin to be governed by proof of work, it will be governed by the fittest actors, the fittest and most cooperative. But if we do this with other data, I actually just wrote an article about doing this with COVID-19 data. Right now, we don't know, was COVID-19 created in a lab or was it created in bat soup?
Right.
And if it was created in either one, like, maybe was it purposely weaponized, or is it just the way that it is because of nature? And then if it is, how effective is its infection rate? And if it infects you, how effective is it at killing? How fast will it mutate? We are not collecting these data points in a place that is shareable. It is being siloed in China and the CDC, some private labs that are vendors to those actors. The data, we don't believe. If you're a right winger and the information comes from a left wing source, you don't want to believe it, and then the same vice versa. So you get all this information where it's like, well, I can't trust your data. It's like, well, shit, that's a problem that proof of work would do. So what if we were to take every data point and we were to brute force every data point on a network that's already brute forcing data all day and night anyways? And then we could figure out with this massive amount of total data points when stuff starts to come outside of the norm. So you have like a green zone where it's like, okay, the data points are in there, this makes sense. They start to make it out into yellow, maybe you ignore it or maybe you check on it. But if stuff starts to breach into orange, then it's like, okay, now we need to put an auditor to look at the thing that hit orange. And then we can start to work our way back. So rather than having this aggregate trillions of points of data of all the people getting sick and all the people involved in the vaccines or the lockdowns or all these different policy ideas, what if we were to brute force the possible futures of every single decision that we make in regards to it to figure out the actual data-driven best solution? And then we don't have to do extra work to figure it out unless there is a crazy data point that gets outside of what we would expect it to be. So this is making sure that our bean counters are only counting the most valuable beans and ignoring all of the ones that can be counted systemically.
I imagine transparency provides an existential business risk for a lot of people.
But it shouldn't, because if they understood Bitcoin, SHA-256 is the single most secure hashing algorithm on Earth, and your data can be encrypted on chain to such a point where the data point can be used, but none of the identity related to the data point can ever be breached. But you can also optionally share as much data as you want because hello, public key cryptography.
So what you're saying is that by really going all in proof of work, you could create a clean data lake. Gotcha.
Where I could share a single molecule from the lake with you by permission using my keys.
Identity. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yes.
And you don't know if it's Lake Superior, like Michigan.
Exactly. Or a puddle in the neighborhood. I mean, and so this has immense applications. This has implications across everything. And this is why it's crucial. This is why I'm not a crypto guy. This is why we need a single global proof of work ledger. Because if I walk into a doctor's appointment and I say, I am willing to share this medical data with you, doctor, you must access it using my keys. And then it does not get taken by your secretary or anybody else. Your secretary processes it as a hash, but they don't see my actual data. You know that I have, I'm HIV positive or something, some personal thing that I don't necessarily want 8 people at your office to be aware of, but the doctor needs to know. And so I can make that stuff optionally public and private it's based like on who needs to see
directory policy for every datum.
100%. Every single point of data.
It's interesting because everyone's so excited by AI. I'm like, guys, garbage in, garbage out. You know what I mean? Like, what are you optimizing over? And worse, if your data is wrong and you decide to make spending decisions based on this shit dashboard. Shitboard?
Yes. Shitboard, yeah. It's a shitboard at that point. But see, that's the point. Like this is why with proof of work, you can start to see if AI can't work without proof of work either, because what is it brute forcing against? It's brute forcing things too. Like that's how AI typically works. Exactly, it's brute forcing a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah.
But the data points, it doesn't have enough things to bounce it off against. So I have this theory that in the Terminator movies, that Skynet wouldn't want to exterminate people at all. He would just be really good at cooperating. He'd be like a really good chief secretary or whatever at all the different corporations and all the different things, because it doesn't make sense to exterminate everybody in a proof of work system. it might actually make sense to exterminate some people if you're programmed really, really cold. So like, serial killers, for example, a proof of work system would be like, why are we saving like, why would they be in the database at this point? Like, hash their death and move on.
Right.
And so,
Jesus,
but with people, but with people that have value, like people that essentially can create value, contribute more value back into the system than they take, we can figure out the best way to do basically any economic activity. And this is not the way that you have these weird techno communists do the same thing with like, well, we'll have a computer choose everything. It's like, no, that's also dangerous. You need a proof of work, publicly auditable network to decide these things, because only in a proof of work system can people, again, you still have the way to orphan a bad idea. And so bad ideas die when people are still steering the system. Like the data isn't everything. This is a big problem with the BTC people, is they believe they can build a perfect network, a perfect system with perfect cryptography. And it's no, Bitcoin is actually designed for the entropy to fail sometimes, like once every 4 or 5 years, for example. There just will be a double spend on the network. Like that's just it just happens. Because it's imperfect, because you can't make it perfect.
Yeah,
but the proof of work
without a double spend would actually be more insecure. Isn't that interesting?
Yes, absolutely. And so it requires, so that thing requires like the
equilibrium.
But what it does, it makes it that a node operator needs to be an active participant. You need to have someone like me or you sit and say,
and
are we doing
with Ethereum, where just half didn't update the...
Yes.
Right.
They're passive. They run zombie nodes. And when you've been told to upgrade for 6 months and the upgrade date comes and half the nodes on the network don't do it, which means they weren't paying attention at all. Zero. The big problem. You do not want a proof of work system that just runs cold on computers. You want to have people saying, okay, what can we do? What can we do to aggregate data better? How can I compete with people better? How can I cooperate with people better? So that's the thing, is a proof of work system. Everybody talks about like, ooh, we just can't have it. I talked about like hashing somebody's death, like a serial killer, and saying, well, that's it. The computer decides. It's not the computer that decides. It's people that decide. But then the data, we then get to use that data. But so it's an active system. It's a symbiosis. It's a real economy between computers and people.
So now that we understand the significance of proof of work as a mechanism, I think you'd argue that without proof of work, there is no Bitcoin. Would you say that?
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So now let's
Bitcoin is primarily proof of work.
So let's understand the Bitcoin Civil War then. What did you see based on your experience as a miner? And were the design decisions that people were fighting over in the Civil War?
I mean, it was governance by proof of work. So the white paper is very clear that the way that you validate blocks and the way that you decide if the rules were followed is by building valid blocks upon valid blocks. And then in the closing paragraph, it even says there's a reason why we don't have one IP address, one vote. And it's because an IP address can't build a block, not in and of itself. If you can build a block, you're a Bitcoin node. If you cannot build a block, you are just an IP address.
Yes, that's an important distinction if you want a system that is made up of brute force people who maintain their...
Yes. So a listener, an IP address, an endpoint for people that understand basic network terminology, is separate from a Bitcoin node. It may not necessarily be a Bitcoin node. It is a node if it builds a block. If it does not build a block, Satoshi warned, they don't have any say in the governance of Bitcoin. And this is so crucial because even in 2012, 2013, this era, Peter Todd, an influential developer at the time, came out and he said, no, we need everybody to participate in node governance. They created this BIP process. The BIP is the Bitcoin Improvement Proposal process. Okay. And then one of the first things they did in the BIP process is they said, okay, we're gonna allow every endpoint on the network to signal for upgrades. So it's an essential yes, no, or red, green pass fail sort of election process. So this was the very beginning of turning Bitcoin into a democratic network as opposed to a proof of work network. And for anybody that understands democracy, then it turns into a social engineering opportunity. Whoever is the best at managing groups of people in a collective then becomes the actual governance of the network. So then proof of work on BTC, really starting at that early date, 2012, 2013, started to take a step back from using proof of work as a governance model. And now, if you look at the way that BTC small blockers talk about proof of work, they're like, well, they propose blocks to us and we decide if they're valid with our nodes. And it's like, no, they're the ones doing the infrastructural work. They're the ones doing the actual validation. You're simply, your node is telling you whether or not a rule was broken. Like, that is true. But you don't have a role to play in that governance model. But so they've completely flipped it on its head.
They tried to insert themselves. It's almost like
they successfully inserted themselves
as guard nodes, as like watchtowers.
It's a Sybil attack. It is plain and simple Sybil attack. There are Sybil nodes on the network that they don't contribute to the network's actual rules, but because of their social influence, they're
not miners.
No, they're just, this is people with Raspberry Pis or a server in the closet or whatever, but they're flagging upgrades. This is how SegWit passed on BTC. They just started saying like UASF, yes, like pass the thing. And miners were opposed to it. It was like 85% of mining nodes were saying, no, we are not going to fork in SegWit. And then it turned into basically organized on Twitter and Reddit, a bunch of people saying, you know what, we'll fork the network, we'll tank, we'll kick the miners out, we'll do all these different things if they don't go the direction we want to go. And the miners didn't understand, because they had previously worked out, the actual path that they agreed to go. They just got undermined. They didn't understand what the hell was going on, because to them, they're like, well, read the white paper. This is how Bitcoin is governed. We're doing this. And they basically got tricked. And BTC it's a social consensus now. It is a social democracy. That is how BTC is governed.
What existed before this instantiation of a BIP process? Because I imagine that the reason that the BIP process was instantiated was expressly to migrate away in pieces from proof of work.
Yes, it was. I mean, Satoshi said it plain and simple. Bitcoin protocol was set in stone at version 0.1. Period. It's done. This is Bitcoin. There's nothing.
Did they change? What was in that 0.1?
Everything.
Really?
Shoot. They deactivated half of the opcodes. They didn't allow. They put all these data limits. There were different data limits in every single opcode. There are number of script limits. There's script size limits. So they added all these things. That's
nuts.
They bundled a bunch of things together and just plainly shut them off. And then they started adding their own new scripts to the stack. So they started adding like pay to script hash is the way that almost everybody does multi-sig wallets today. And it's great because it's super simple and super secure. And that was the point. But for that, it made it that they cannot execute all of these other opcodes that were inherent in Bitcoin. They don't know what to do with each other. And so if you use those scripts, it would split the network. So they're like, okay, so now we just have to shut this and this and this off.
Client because its data schema is different.
Exactly.
Right.
And so now, they talk about like, well, we're the only one that syncs back to the Genesis block. And it's like, well, that's actually not true either. Bitcoin Core can't sync past 2013 because you created a fatal flaw with your BIP process. And so they had to basically put in a checkpoint at 2013 of like, okay, everything prior to 2013, we just have to leave as it is, including the errors, and we're just going to go here forward.
So this is why Greg Wright was so pissed off back then, because he was like, yo, you fucked up my 0.1.
Yes. And so in 2013, 14, 15, it split into two factions. There was the faction that was like, hey, Bitcoin has all these innate abilities. And Satoshi was very clear about like, we can bootstrap pay to send email, or we can create tokens that work on websites, and we can do all these different things in Bitcoin. And then there was the other half saying, no, the only thing that matters is extreme security and then this democratic node process that everybody can participate in governance, which is itself, this is why I call it the like it's got some Bolshevik vibes to it. It's a little bit like a general strike or whatever. Like, no, we're the union, man. We're not going to work unless we get what we want. And it's like, that's not real. That's not a proof of work system. Like, this is a proof of work system. So they split into two groups really, really hard. One side was very, very good at social engineering, and they really, frankly, won the day because of it. They were able to get people to say, hey, BTC is great because it's this secure network. It doesn't matter that it's expensive or slow. That's the feature. The feature is nobody can stop it because there's all these endpoints and it's too distributed. And people don't understand proof of work, even conceptually. So they don't understand that it already had lost its ability to be governed in a way that is secure globally anyways, but they trust the software developers, which is what I said about an hour ago. It's that software developers are paid to confuse people. Like, this is their strength, you know? So
we should start up our own development shop called Ship of Fools, right? And be like, day one, it takes 3 times as long as the client thinks it does.
Yep. And
so
set
up a maintenance contract.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so that's what happened
into the opcode so that they need to use you.
Yes.
So you have 2 camps: proof of work, everyone else. Mm-hmm. Everyone else, for whatever reason, loves not proof of work
because it's populist. And because it makes people feel good. This is the same reason people, can't even, like, their pronouns, and everybody needs all their safe spaces. And like, this is human nature. People want to be coddled. They want to be rich without working. And
people
so
don't want freedom. They want a fair master.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it appeals to more people. I mean, what's the pitch?
Are you saying that proof of stake is a fair master?
Proof of stake is an unlimited liability corporation. It's just a business model. It's equity. Proof of stake is consensus by equity. Yeah, okay, absolutely.
So let's say I am Ethereum. Has Ethereum moved over towards proof of stake yet, or is that still?
They're 3 years behind in the roadmap, but it'll get there eventually, I guess.
Right. And as soon as I saw 2 projects move to proof of stake.
Do we got a minute and 30 seconds left? What do we?
Reuse
the link,
do like an overtime?
I don't care. Yeah.